In case you haven't seen it, we've just released the first look at Unreal Engine 5 with some exciting new technology. Make sure you get over to unrealengine.com to check out all the news. Nanite's virtualized micropolygon geometry frees artists to create as much geometric detail as the eye can see. Nanite's virtualized geometry means that film-quality source art comprised of hundreds of millions, if not billions, of polygons can be imported directly into Unreal Engine. Anything from ZBrush sculpts to photogrammetry scans to CAD data can be imported, and it just works. Nanite geometry is streamed and scaled in real time, so there's no need for polygon budgets, polygon memory budgets, or draw call budgets. There's no need to bake detailed normal maps or manually author LODs, and there's no loss of quality. It just works. Lumen is a fully dynamic global illumination solution that immediately reacts to scene and light changes. The system renders diffuse and infinite bounces of indirect specular reflections in huge detailed environments at scale ranges from kilometers to millimeters. Artists and designers can create more dynamic scenes with Lumen. For example, the change of sun angles, such as time of day, or turning on a flashlight, or blowing a hole in the ceiling, and then direct lighting just adapts accordingly. Lumen erases the needs for waiting for light maps to bake, or even authoring light map UVs. It's a huge time saving for artists who no longer need to wait in the editor to light an environment, and it works just the same on a console. Some good things to know about Unreal Engine 5. It will release in 2021. It'll be free to download and use just like Unreal Engine 4. Developers will be able to migrate their Unreal Engine 4 projects to Unreal Engine 5, which is backward compatible. Unreal Engine 4 is ready for next gen now, with console support shipping in Unreal Engine 4.25's release. Make sure you keep your ears peeled for news about Unreal Engine 5. It's going to be a very exciting time. This week we released Unreal Engine 4.25, which can be downloaded from the Epic Games launcher and from GitHub. Make sure you go to unrealengine.com and check out the blog, which shares many of the new features, but you can also go to the documentation page, and on the left side you'll find the release notes. Some of the great new features in this release include support for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, as well as Unreal Engine Insight improvements. One of the things I'm really excited about is that Niagara is now fully production ready. We've also done some major improvements to the shading models. This includes support for anisotropic materials, which you can see on the wheels of this car. We've also got physically based translucency, which helps improve the clear coat system, which you can see here on this particular render, which is absolutely stunning. Something I'm excited about is also the chaos physics systems, which got a nice major update and can be worked with inside of Unreal Engine 4.25. We also have the high quality media exporter. The audio system has gotten a major update. We also now have LiDAR support inside of Unreal Engine 4.25, improvements to the HoloLens 2 system, major improvements to the ray tracing system, improvements to AI. Something I'm also excited about is the control rig improvements, which allow you to set up full rigs for our skeletal mesh systems and work with them inside of Sequencer to pose characters and actually do full animations. We've done things to improve our variant manager, live USD support, and things like improving our eye adaptation and hair and fur render, and I'm barely a quarter way through the release notes. Make sure that you go to the Epic Games launcher, download Unreal 4.25, and start working with these amazing new features. They're there waiting for you. Hello and welcome to this week's stream. We've got some exciting guests today. I'm really honored to have the team that I work with on a regular basis here today to join us for this week's stream, which is exploring the academic demand for Unreal Engine and real-time 3D skills. We've got here Lisa Tenorio, who's the head of global education for Unreal Engine. And we've got also Linda Sellheim, who is our let me see, she's the Education Partner Manager. And we also have Seven Siegel, who's the Student Program Manager. So we've got a really great show today because this one is one that I've been looking forward to. We've got a lot of amazing information. A lot of the stuff that we are going to talk about today, we've really been dealing with quite a bit and talking about a lot with the education community across universities that we visit. Mark and Tom and I, by the way, Mark and Tom are in the chat, so they'll be chiming in and you'll see them pop in there. See Tom said hello on the chat already. And they'll be answering questions as we go along. But, you know, as you know, we visit a lot of academic institutions. We talk to a lot of people that are working and teaching Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, Quixel. And we work very closely with Lisa and Linda and Seven. Seven's traveling around all over the place. And I think one of the things that's really amazing is that things are happening, right? You guys chime in here and talk. I mean, things are happening all over the place. And Unreal Engine, as you can tell, is everywhere. And the demand for Unreal Engine skills is growing exponentially. And I think this is one of the reasons that this show, I think, is really important and really relevant, is because, you know, I think, Lisa, you've been with Epic now almost 2 years now, I guess.
Almost, yeah. August will be 2 years.
Yeah, and
Crazy time.
I know. It's been an amazing ride, because I think one of the things that was very special and very unique is that when you came on board and when you joined, you know, you came from a background where data was really important. And I think one of the initial things that you really wanted to know when you came on board is, you know, what's happening. What, you know, you wanted to get some real metrics about who's using Unreal, what's happening in real time, what is this trajectory towards real time, and what are people doing, and you had come from a background where you were gathering that data, and it was really being meaningful in the work that you were doing before you came to Epic. And so to come to Epic and sort of get that data and be able to use it as a meaningful way to sort of look forward into how Unreal Engine was factoring into the evolution of not just game, but all the other industries that were starting to contact us and want to access Unreal Engine. I mean, you know, tell us a little bit about, you know, how that was for you.
Well, I mean, when I joined, it was really at this time of high growth, right? Where at Epic real time, we were seeing real time 3D being applied outside of games in all these different industries. And as soon as I joined, the first thing I heard is customers are, you know, they're looking for more Unreal developers, Unreal artists. There's this huge demand, new jobs are being created. But, you know, we see it, like we're on the front line talking to our customers, we see that growth. But, you know, being able to put some concrete numbers behind it for me is kind of orienting where we want to go with the education team. What kind of a challenge do we have ahead of us in terms of fulfilling this talent demand that's out there, right? And I think, you know, and this I've also seen in other, you know, roles I've held, is that unless you're working in these industries, it's really hard to know. This technology is changing so fast, right? All these changes
Absolutely.
are just happening and this stuff is growing, and unless you're in it, you don't really know what's going on. And so for students or educators or job seekers which may not be in these industries, you know, it's really important, I think, for us to build awareness of what's going on. I think we can play that role. We're kind of in the middle of, you know, we're the technology platform, right? So we're talking to
Yep.
both customers, we're talking to educators, and we can be the link between those two to be a pulse point on what we're seeing and what's going on. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think getting a macro view is super helpful, to really get a sense of the shift in what's happening.
Absolutely. So we're going to spend some time and dig into some of the work and research that Lisa really piloted and pioneered in a few minutes. But I want to take a minute to introduce Linda also, because Linda I've known for a long time. And Linda came in and has done a lot of amazing things at Epic so far already. But, you know, she's going to talk to us a little bit about the Creators Field Guide, which she was the principal architect of, which is another really important piece of work that we've done recently. that focuses on really expounding and sharing the variety of skills that people really need to have if they're looking at specific industries. And and I'll let Linda tell us a little bit and whet our appetite so when she jumps in here in a little bit. But also Linda is really also focused on secondary education and the secondary education space. And I think that in the coming weeks or months, we'll probably focus entirely at one of these streams on secondary, because I think there's demand for it. And I just saw it pop up on the stream here as one of the people saying, I wish there was more for secondary education. So, introduce yourself a little bit and then tell us about what you're going to talk about in a few minutes after Lisa.
Yeah, hi, I'm Linda Sellheim, and Louis and I both had many years in education prior to coming to Epic. I was at LinkedIn Learning for a while, so creating learning content and working with other educators is something that I love to do. And the field guide is really one of those things that I would have liked to have had. We really look at Unreal. It's to help educators, students, job seekers really know what to focus on. And I'll go into more detail on that. It's really works, it's hand in hand with the Burning Glass report that Lisa's going to talk about. And then for you secondary educators on the line, we launched our first lesson plan page this week. So you can check that out if you Google Epic Unreal Secondary Education, it'll pop up, and we have our first few lesson plans. We have Fortnite, Twinmotion, and Unreal. So we're pretty excited about having that to share.
Awesome. And then we also have Seven Siegel, who I've really enjoyed working with. Seven is is quite a spirit and brings amazing energy to Epic. Seven focuses on the student programs, and since landing here at Epic has done already a tremendous amount of work, and I think the students really tremendously appreciate the efforts that Seven has brought to Epic. Seven has been the principal architect of the Fast Track program, and there's already been thousands of students that have gone through the Fast Track program. So Seven's going to talk about the Fast Track program, which is in progress right now, share some of the outcomes, talk about types of material that students are working through right now, what the process is, maybe some of the future of the Fast Track program, and maybe share some other things. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you might be talking about.
Yeah, hi. I'm happy to be on the stream. This is a great experience. I like having the whole crew together. Yeah, the Fast Track has been a great success. It's really been set up as a workshop series to bring someone from I've never touched Unreal before to I feel comfortable starting my own project. And it's been really awesome to see the amount of students that have jumped at the opportunity to start learning. And alongside this, we've put together a Discord server where all these students are getting together and communicating with one another, and have been having Q&As from industry professionals, ranging from people at Epic to just complete outsiders that can talk about, we've had game publishers like founders of publishers come on. We've had recruiters be on, and we've got technical people. We just had yesterday a game designer and game programmer at Psyonix, the makers of Rocket League, do a Q&A, which was really good. And next week we have Tom Shannon in the chat. He'll be doing a Q&A specifically on all the good technical questions. So yeah, I'm really excited to tell you all more about the Fast Track more in depth and how good it is and really helpful for educators and students alike to use.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
So each Lisa and Linda and Seven are each going to share in depth the material that they've been working on, because we all wear a lot of hats at Epic, right. But we also get an opportunity to focus on some specific material, which I think we're all really proud of. And I'd like to spend some time talking to you, Lisa, about specifically the Burning Glass report, because this is something that people can download right now from unrealengine.com and also burningglass.com. And we'll share some links and show you, I think Lisa's going to share her screen. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what motivated you to work with Burning Glass and what it is and why it's important to educators and what they should be thinking about, as they go
Yeah.
to, and why they should even, go and seek out this report?
Yeah, sure. So as you said when we kicked this off, we really wanted to put some numbers behind the demand for real-time 3D skills. And with the goal of how can we better inform students, educators, and really anybody that wants to build their career in real time so they know what skills they need and what all the possibilities and opportunities are. So last year we worked with Burning Glass, which is, if you haven't heard of them, it's a labor market analytics firm. And we asked them to do a really in-depth report on this topic. Burning Glass reports on all kinds of different labor market trends. They look at everything from, they look at all industries, they look at data science jobs and IT jobs, and but their specialty is really around analyzing, the work they do is around analyzing job postings from employers. So it's the source of the data is really the things that employers are posting. So at a really high level, and Burning Glass can explain better the magic that they do. But what they do is they scan, I think, like 40,000 different job boards to cull all the job postings, which equates to something like, I think they told me it was something like there are millions of unique job postings that are posted on a daily basis.
So
So they
people
put all
looking
that
for
into,
employees, basically.
yeah. So any company that posts a job basically will get scraped by Burning Glass's technology, and they'll put that in their database, and then they use natural language processing to kind of parse the text of the job posting. So all their data comes from what employers are saying, and they can translate that into skills and compentencies. So they can give a
Oh,
sense of, you know, who's hiring, which companies are those, what are the job titles, what what industries are they in, but also really get down to the skills level. What are the specific skills employers are requesting?
so did you do this because, like, you knew that educators or the academic community and just about anyone, not just the academic community, but particular to this audience, would value this information? They cared about how to prepare students for tomorrow, today and tomorrow.
Oh, I mean, like you and Linda, I worked in education before coming to Epic as well. I spent 5 years there, and it's so important, right? I mean, you want your students to get jobs when they graduate. This is the goal. Students are spending money on a degree program. Ultimately, the measurement is of success is, can they find work and employment? So I know for me, working in education, this kind of data was so valuable, to know how we had to kind of steer the programs to better align to what industry wants. Because the thing about technology, it's all changing so fast for all of us, right? I mean, so you need this data on kind of a constant basis to see what the trends are. And as a job seeker, knowing that certain specific skills can give you an edge is so key. I mean, when you're just starting out in your career, the job market's pretty competitive, right? So knowing that if I have XYZ skill, I'm going to really stand out above other candidates is huge. That might be the thing that gets me in the door. I mean, it was a long time ago when I went to college, but it was very similar. At that time I had a specific technology skill, and I know that that's, kind of what led me to my first job and then enabled me to kind of build from there.
Well,
So,
I think there's something else too that, at Epic, we hear from a lot of people, and there's lots of people contacting us. And so we kind of have an interesting finger on the pulse because we have lots of companies in, the architecture space and the media and entertainment space and in the automotive space and across many industries reaching out to us. And so we kind of have a luxury of having that interesting finger on the pulse, but then to actually get a variety of data that validates it that we can share with other people, I think is super
right.
significant. So, when we
It
go,
makes it concrete.
yeah,
Yeah.
when we go to schools and say, hey, listen, this is happening and you need to prepare your students, that's one thing, and they're like, how do you help validate that statement? And then to be able to say, well, here's a report that has concrete numbers and and you can hand to your students, and they can go and not just look at what Epic says, but see what, people that do this every day say. That makes a really significant difference.
I think the other thing is, today is a moment in time, right? And we can look at the job demand today, or we could look at the past year and say, okay, this is the number of jobs. What's cool about Burning Glass is they've got a history, their database that goes back years. And so they use that historical data to project forward. So they can kind of tell us what can we expect to see in the next 10 years, which I think is also important, because we can pivot programs to align to this today, but is this going to stay around for a while? And I think, that was the other piece that we wanted to find out in all of this is we see, huge demand right now. Where is that going? Is that going to continue? What could we expect? So that's another really important part of this report that Burning Glass did, is doing that kind of 10-year forecast as well, as best they can.
Yeah. Do you want to share some of it?
Yeah. I mean, I do want to say before I jump into it that you mentioned the blog, which we did a really nice recap of the findings, and you may have already seen it, but if not, I would check that out. That's kind of the Reader's Digest version of the report and pulls some of the really key highlights out of it. From that blog article, you can then download the really detailed report, which I can dig into more. It's, a 40-page or so report. So if you like data, you can really get lost in some of the charts and graphs and details that are in there. And I, for those that are like maybe only able to tune in for part of it, I can give you the spoiler alert. I can give you the net of what they found. Should I do that? Should I cut to the bottom thing? I mean, the big picture ultimately that Burning Glass found is that jobs that require real-time skills are growing 600% faster than the job market overall. And within the realm of real-time skills, Unreal Engine is one of the fastest growing skills to have on your resume. So this is definitely like
and we didn't make that up. That's not us making that up, right?
No, I didn't make that up. You can go and read it from Burning Glass. But yeah, I can pull up the report and like step you through some of this.
Sure.
Do I share my screen? Oh, here it is. Okay, let's dive in.
Nice.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
So this is the report. It looks at both the demand for 3D graphics as a whole and then real-time 3D specifically. So it was published in May of last year. So don't worry, this is an abbreviated version. I don't want to make you dizzy. There's a lot. So I'm just going to focus on a couple sections of this. But at the beginning, you have basically the high-level findings, and it talks a lot about how they went about doing this work, and then digs into some of the findings in detail. And the last section is what are the implications for students, for educators, for job seekers. So if I kind of come to the findings part of it first, I want to talk for a minute about the approach they used. So Burning Glass first looked at the larger pool of all 3D graphics jobs, which looking at the job postings from 2017 to 2018 represented about 300,000 new jobs, which is a lot of jobs, but I know, kind of a random number, so it's hard to put it in context. But I think Burning Glass shared a comparison stat that for me, I thought was super interesting, helped to kind of orient this, which is that is 55,000 more jobs than all data science jobs last year. So data science, you hear about it all the time, fast growing industry, tons of jobs, can't find enough data scientists. Actually, 3D graphics jobs represents a bigger pool of jobs, but you don't hear as much press about it, but a very healthy, robust industry. And then they, as I said, they can kind of project forward based on the historical job data. So looking at 3D graphics, those jobs are growing 42% faster than the job market overall, which is very healthy growth. So 3D graphics as a whole is a really healthy industry. But I think, then you look at the subset of 3D graphics jobs, which are the jobs that ask for some some real-time 3D skill. And that's where the growth is just crazy astronomical. So real-time 3D skills represented about 10% of all 3D graphics jobs in 2018. And, that is projected to grow 600% faster, as I said, over the next 10 years. So, we're going to see what that means is basically real-time 3D jobs are going to represent a much, much larger percentage of all 3D graphics jobs going forward. I haven't done the math on it, but you kind of see that the trend is that's going to represent more and more of those 3D graphics jobs. And Burning Glass can look at salaries too. This is also a good point. Like, okay, so there's a lot of jobs. Job growth is great, but are these good jobs? And yeah, these are good jobs with good salaries. And we'll dig into some of the salary data they found as well. So let me talk a little bit about how they identified 3D graphics jobs and the real-time jobs, because I think, we spent a lot of time kind of working with them and going back and forth on what are the skills that should be pulled into those categories, right? And it's really, this is an example of some of the 3D graphic skills that they identify. There's a full list in the appendix of the report. So if you're curious and you want to see every single skill that they accounted for. And when I say skill, this is a little bit of a mix. There's specific technologies in here, right? And then there's also some general things. So, there's specific platforms or technologies. You see Unreal Engine on there, but they also look for certain general skills like VR, AR, or they might look for just game engines more broadly, right? So it's a blend of technology and general technical skills. And then if you keep going, you can see that subset of what was categorized as a real-time 3D skill that played into those 30,000 jobs. So this is just a sampling of some of those. But again, that full list is in the back in the appendix. Questions about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
it makes
far?
sense. Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of start digging into some of the findings, so, this is where you can really see the growth of real-time 3D jobs. In 2013, they represented about 4% of all 3D graphics jobs. And then you can see the huge jump to, in 2018, representing about 10% of all jobs. And then as that growth continues, we're going to see the percent going up. But I think is interesting in the report and is really diving into, so where are these jobs, right? So there's a lot of jobs. Where are they showing up specifically and what kinds of jobs are they? And so this table in the findings breaks down the career areas where we see a lot of growth. And, there's the usual suspects here. You would expect to see a lot of jobs in IT and engineering, developer jobs, obviously there's a lot of jobs there. But what's interesting to me is some of the other high growth categories like, marketing and public relations. So Unreal Engine's being used in advertising, that this is an area where real time is expanding into. You see analysis on here. So for data visualization, perhaps, real time 3D is being used there. Education and training is on here. So simulation. I mean, there's some really interesting areas where real-time 3D is showing up that you might not expect. And then if you keep going down into the data, they start to surface some of the jobs themselves and the job titles. Now, these are sort of general job titles. I think one of the challenges, especially as Burning Glass looked at some of the data, is the huge variance in job titles. I think because, the application of real-time 3D in some of these industries is really new, that employers are using, especially cross-industry, are using wildly different job titles. So it's a little bit different difficult sometimes to figure out, like, is this a real-time job? What does this job mean? What does this job do? And I think that speaks to some of the work that Linda has been doing, and the Creators Field Guide and some of that, which we'll talk about, is an effort to put some consistency around some of these new and emerging job roles that we see. Because obviously video game developer, we know that one makes sense, but some of these other job titles that are high growth, or we can go down into kind of just the number of job postings, looking at it by number of job postings. So they have, for example, architect on here, which real-time 3D might show up for a role that actually says architect, but it might be something else. It might be architectural visualization specialist or something like that. It might not exactly match these job titles. And so that's some of the challenge of parsing some of this data and knowing, what to look for exactly when you're looking for a real-time job. What else? Oh, salaries. This is really important. Okay,
the good stuff.
Yeah, so, in terms of sometimes, a specific skill set, especially if it's in high demand, can actually create a salary premium, right? So employers are willing to pay more for certain skills because they're hard to find, or because there's, so much competition, because there's so many jobs being created. So Unreal Engine's at the top of the list there. So you can kind of see how adding some of these real-time skills creates a salary benefit. And then I'm not going to go into all the different pages, but they kind of break it down from there, like where does that salary premium have the biggest impact? So they look at developers versus artists. And I think the other interesting part that the report touches on is the percentage of, I can stop sharing my screen because I'm not going to show you that graph, the percentage of real-time jobs that are entry level versus requiring a lot of experience. And so Burning Glass found that about 20% of real-time jobs are entry-level jobs. And that's actually where a place where the salary premium really plays out. So, if you're just starting out in your career and you're looking for a nice, lucrative, well-paying job, adding Unreal Engine skills can really give you a boost, in particular at that early stage of your career.
Yeah, there was a really interesting question that popped through about the idea of working from home and the curiosity about how working from home might actually boost the projections even a little bit higher. And I don't know that we can answer that question, but I think that it's interesting to speculate how, one of the things that we did at Epic is, make Unreal Engine free for everyone to use. And, I know that when I started working in 3D, a computer to run something like Unreal Engine used to cost $20,000, and access to software used to cost $20,000. But now, a simple PC and Unreal Engine, the barrier to entry has never been lower in many ways. And so, to be able to be in our homes and work in these real-time fields is very, very accessible in many ways. And it's the ability for us to generate the learning material for people to actually skill up, and then to have this type of material and the material that Linda is going to present, and to say, well, this is how much of this you need to learn and how much of this you need to learn in order to be able to even apply for these types of these roles is really an enormous game changer, and incredibly valuable tools to be able to address the demand that you're sharing with us.
Agreed. I mean, I think, there's all kinds of impacts of working virtually, teaching virtually, right? I mean, as a team, we're experimenting with all kinds of ways to reach learners in this new virtual way. Unreal Engine can be used in a lot of these cases, so it's exciting. So I don't even know where some of this will go.
For the group here, how do you think, what do teachers need to how do they look at this report? How do educators, how do people working to build learning material on YouTube or training centers, or even if you are at a game development studio and your job is to help other people become better at 3D skills? How do they use something like this? What would your recommendation be to this group?
Well, include real time. I'll start, I guess. I would say, I think we do see schools at the university level including Unreal Engine in the curriculum. I mean, some schools, and Lewis, you could probably think of some great examples, have classes dedicated to learning the engine, right? But even if it's using the tools for student projects, that is another great way to incorporate this into the curriculum and expose students to some of these skills. What I think is really exciting is some of the stuff Linda's been working on with secondary, because in the secondary space, it's less about using the tools in a professional context, but actually using the tools to teach academic subjects, teach history. Like I was thinking of the virtual history museum example. You can speak to that one, Linda.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Nick Pant, who we've worked with, who's been doing really great work using Unreal, almost like a presentation tool. He's done a couple of projects for us, and the lesson plans are available. But I think that, the really great teachers are brave, and they're going in as facilitators and bringing these tools into the classroom in the secondary space. And there's, we don't know what these people are what these students, as they move on in their careers, are going to do with these tools. I mean, look at the explosion of real-time 3D across industries, retail, everything. We're seeing it everywhere. And so these students are going to take this with them. And I think one of our biggest obstacles is getting educators, I guess, to just jump in and try it. You don't have to be the sage on the stage or the brand expert. These are big tools, you're not using them 40, 50 hours a week in a studio like people in the industry are, but students just fall into this and love it. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing really exciting work where it's being used, and looking for those teachers. If you're out there on this Twitch thing, let me know what you're doing, because we want to know. We want to get involved and help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think just from the student perspective, the thing that I've seen is students are already in these spaces, right? They exist in these digital spaces on the day-to-day, all the time. And whether it's like most obviously playing Fortnite when they're at home, of course they would never play at school, but they hang out in these digital spaces that is real-time 3D, and they don't think about it that way. But being able to meet them where they are and introduce the learning concepts, be able to teach within those spaces, allows them greater comfort in understanding real-time 3D for when they become professionals. They'll have grokked it already, and also just you'll be able to reach them easier. And so this teaching in real-time 3D is and learning and just even using it for even side learning is extremely beneficial for students, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my experience is that when we were still traveling and visiting institutions, that we've been in meetings with department heads, department chairs, where they have asked very specifically, we're looking at the next academic term, looking to see how we can tweak our curriculum, or how we can change, the whole program, what should we be looking at, and very directly point to the Burning Glass report, the creator's field guide, and say, here are two very clear examples chocked full of a huge accumulation of data that says that this is the trend, over the next 10 years of what would be valuable for your students to be graduating with. So, if you guys are educators out there, if you are department heads, if you are administrators, and you need data to support full curriculum shifts, this is great material to help in that way. Lisa, are there any thoughts that you want to sort of wrap up the Burning Glass report with?
Well, so I did want to make a note that this initial Burning Glass report is US data only. I mean, I think it shows some trends which are probably applicable globally, but we are actually working with Burning Glass right now on an addendum to this report. So look out for, I would say over the next month or two, for data on UK, Europe, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. So we'll be able to expand the
Awesome.
view a little
Yeah.
bit, which I think will be helpful. I saw a preview. There's definitely, I mean, if you look at this globally, it's even bigger than what I've described, of course, but a lot of demand globally. And I think, I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg right now, really,
Yeah.
of where this will go. And, it's something we want to keep, checking in on and tracking and trying to share what we find out with our ecosystem of educators and students, and keep them informed of, what's going to help them be successful in the future. And the last thing I want to point out is we have all this free learning. So even if you're not in a program, and even if, your school's not offering a formal course in this, we've got all these free courses online to learn. So great resources.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's move on if we can to Linda and the creator's field guide. So part of what I think really motivated, the Burning Glass report did is it helped motivate, we got all this data, and then we were like, well, so we've got all this demand for real time. What is real time, right? And I think that that was a question that we've been working over many years to help define. And we did some early blogs about, what is a technical artist, what is a surface artist, but we realized that we needed a lot more information, a lot more data. We needed to break down the engine, because even at Epic, we do things a certain way, but then other studios do things other ways. And then we started seeing people in the film industry go, well, we want to use real time in the film industry. And we started using, watching architects and people in other industries go, well, we want this piece and we want this piece. But then they came to us and said, well, what part of the engine does that? We want to just focus, these things and these bits. And so when they came to us for learning, they wanted to focus in on their learning, but it was very difficult for us to tell them exactly what they needed to learn. We needed to provide them with a foundation. And I think that in many ways, that's where you stepped in, Linda, with your educational background and said, well, let me help architect this skills taxonomy, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what you did and your approach in working with Lisa and the team to build the Creator's Field Guide?
Yeah, we really drilled down, and it's a beautiful guide, and I hope everyone's downloaded it. And don't be deceived by the glamour, because there's a lot of grit in here for educators to use. We sort of cover different things, but the main goal was to create a roadmap for students, administrators, educators, job seekers, even career changers, to really understand what these entry-level Unreal Engine skills were and how they apply to different jobs. So we, as Lisa said, we have a unique position sitting at Epic, as a software company, that we interact with industry constantly. So, I could spend my entire days reading the stuff that comes through in our blogs. There's jobs in every industry and interesting things going on in simulation, and there's even a shift in advertising and graphic design and people using 3D more and more. So we really wanted to be able to look at some of these careers. We looked at this guide through the window of 8 emerging careers. And we looked at automotive, and I'll go into the guide, but looked at automotive, we looked at architecture, we looked at simulation, we looked at film, we looked at what we call experiential design, but that is so much stuff. You're seeing it at rock concerts all the time now. And, we wanted to bring this information to educators. And, as your students are starting to learn this stuff, and it's a reason to bring it into the classroom, because science, it's just across the board. And we want administrators to understand also that there's a reason when your faculty comes and says, I need to teach this, I need access to this. So it ties in really nicely with the Burning Glass stuff. And as I said, it's a design as a guide to help you. Like, where do we want to go from here? There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So I think that, if you are downloading or going to the blog and downloading the Creator's Field Guide, if you haven't looked at it, we're going to take a look at it. You'll share your screen, but is this a tool for students? Is it a tool for educators? Is it something that is it immediately accessible and usable in that way?
Yes, I mean, I think it can serve both. I mean, we interviewed people. We spent about a good 6 months on this project, and we interviewed people at Epic, and we interviewed people across the industries. So we talked to Gensler, we talked to people in the automotive industry, and we really asked them, what are those entry level skills? What do you want your people to do in their first job? Not even necessarily what are they coming out of school with, but hitting the ground. What do you want them to do? Tell me what your perfect starting employee is going to be doing. And then we started, really cataloging those and working on this taxonomy and breaking Unreal out and really looking at, okay, if you're looking at a feature like sequencer, or we're looking at editor basics, what are the things you need to start with? What should you know? And what's the right language that you should have? Because that's another big part of it. A lot of times educators, they haven't been in the field as recently, and they're teaching a tool and they're teaching, I hate to say it, but the old, pull down the menu, teach every feature all the way through. And we wanted to get outside of that and really say you could zero in and sort of learn these things, at least to start with, and be able to build a foundation. And the students, they go on job interviews, they don't have the correct language, they don't know really. Somebody says, do you know lighting? Well, yeah, I know lighting. Well, it turns out they know 2 features in lighting, but that was lighting to them. But what we wanted to show was really what those core skills were at an entry level in lighting. So the guide has 18 competencies, and each competency has between about 5 and 15 skills attached to it. And we've written very descriptive learning objectives. We used Bloom's taxonomy as kind of a guide, so you can actually see what students need to be able to understand and apply. What they should really be able to focus on. And then the other thing is, going back to the job things, job descriptions are all over the place. That's the other thing we learned when we were doing this, that we've known from our research. So in talking to people, we sort of summarized our titles, but we really focused on those skills that you'd need in those areas. And when you read an ad for a job in some type of visualization or something using real-time 3D, you might just see Unreal and maybe a few features, but you don't really see a lot of detail in that job ad. But we wanted to equip people with, as I said, the language when they go into those interviews to be able to talk about what they really know.
Sure. One thing that's really interesting is that, myself, like some of us at Epic, have been, teaching Unreal for a very long time. And we'll go some days and do 3 days of teaching and training at a academic institution or whatever. And we'll spend, hours and hours teaching and training, but the engine is extremely wide and extremely deep, right? And so I think one of the things that's really great about this guide is that if you are interested in a particular field, let's say you want to become a visualization specialist, or you want to become a technical artist or a surface artist, what you've done in it is you've said, well, these are the relevant bits and pieces of the engine that can help you if this is your goal, specifically coming out of school, right? You need to learn, 60% of lighting, 30% of materials, this percentage of blueprint, because if you're saying, I'm going to learn all of blueprints and all of lighting and all of, particle systems and all of sequencer, you better get started, and you better, bring in a lot of food and have somebody deliver a lot, because it's going to take a bit, right? We work at Epic, and I don't know anyone that knows all of Unreal Engine at Epic, right? And so learning all of it is, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I don't know anyone who's done it. Right, so
got to have the context.
Yeah, the idea of being able to look at a guide that says, well, here are good bits and pieces to learn in the entire breadth of the engine that are going to help you focus, because focus is really critical. And so, are you ready to share some of the guides so people can get a peek at it?
Yeah, I can jump in and.
Okay. Let me Make sure that people can see you. And feel free to share. There you go.
Can you see my?
We can see you.
Can see the guide. Okay.
We can't see it. We saw it a minute ago, and then it popped off. Let's see. There you go. We see
sorry
it
about
now.
that. There we are.
We got it.
So I'm going to kind of jump in. Obviously, there's a table of contents. It's a big guide. That's why I said don't get lost in the beautiful imagery. There's lots of guts in here. So I'm just going to jump down to some of the careers. We do talk a lot about explaining what is interactive 3D, and we've got a great new video out on YouTube that you should definitely check out, particularly if you're in the secondary space. I want to jump down into where we really talk about the purpose of the guide here. So as I said, it's pretty much what I talked about in really helping arm people with what they need to know. But as you look at the little graph, it shows you sort of how we designed this for information. So we use the sequencer competency here, and then we looked at, your mastery level of 50%. So as you go through the guide, you'll see this in relationship to the careers. So as I said, we used Bloom's as kind of a guide for this because we really do want to help educators with this project. So you can see here for an architectural visualization specialist, and it's a broad title, covers a lot of ideas around jobs in architecture, but these are the main skills that kept coming up over and over again when we interviewed people. Like something like datasmith, heavily used in architecture, but not so much in other places. And each one of these shows sort of your mastery of this at these levels. Up through, so we looked at simulation specialists, and I learned some great stuff in these interviews with simulations. Levels of fidelity, when they talk about, not everything is super glossy and beautiful. Sometimes you just need the simulation of the project at a lower fidelity. Looked at automotive. And automotive and aerospace are very, very similar with something we learned. So we sort of combined those two. Technical artist across both games and in virtual production. And technical animator. Previz. And this one's the one that I find so interesting because this sort of picks up a lot of areas. 3D being used in everything from illustration to graphic design to advertising, creating experiences. So this is a hugely growing area. And surface artist. But this is what I really, and this is something to take some time, on and go through where we go into each competency and the skills, and we really defined measurable learning objectives. So this is something that can really help you as an educator. You can definitely, jump into this. It can help you build curriculum, lesson plans. And as we grow this program, you'll see we hopefully will take this online and have an interactive site and include interviews and many things. So we're really hoping to expand on this beyond our initial entry-level competencies. And be able to award skills badges as they align with our online courses. We also included a glossary for people getting started, kind of a basic glossary that aligns with everything we've done. And that's pretty much it. I'll stop sharing. I love to talk about it, so reach out to me if you, if you want more, individual information, and we're all sharing this with our people.
So it sounds like if you are an instructor of some kind, an educator, and you are looking at a guide and you're tailoring a class, a course for, maybe the fall or something like that, and you're like, well, I want to inject Unreal Engine into it, or I want to transition into Unreal Engine or whatever, you can look at this guide and say, well, maybe I should teach this much lighting. I need to teach this much materials. this much sequencer, or maybe I didn't even know about sequencer and I should look it up because I should put it in there, you know.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. I mean, I would, if you're doing a beginning Unreal class, I definitely align to these. But even if you're doing, something more advanced, I mean, making sure that you have covered these skills.
perfect. Awesome. Well, we're going to reserve a few minutes at the end, so that we can ask some general questions. Anything that Seven or Linda or Lisa that you wanted to add in general about, because I know that we've all sort of embraced a lot of the material that we're sharing today, but we've got plenty to still talk about, and I wanted to give everyone a
No,
chance.
I mean, I think we want to do more. I mean, I think there's more to be done here. And Linda was kind of referencing, where we want to take this in terms of aligning it to the learning content. Make it easier to kind of see okay, I want to follow this path. What's the specific learning that ties to that?
Yeah, I know that when I've shared this at institutions, and when I've shared this with people that are not aware of it, they're like, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you," because it's, they're like, "We've been waiting for this." So, it's a great, great resource, and thank you, Linda, for working so earnestly on it and making it, such an appealing guide, because it's really nice to work with and look at as well.
Thanks, Liz. I wish I would have had it when I was teaching.
Me too. Well, awesome. Let us move into the Fast Track program, which is another really exciting initiative. I think that something that came about not that long ago was that we really started focusing on students' initiatives. And when Seven joined us, just really hasn't been that long. I think
about 8 months.
Yeah. We wanted to find some ways to really engage with the student community. And I think that, you sort of devised a way to bring Unreal to the student community. And I'll let you share a little bit more about the idea of the Fast Track program. Tell us what it is.
Yeah. So the goal of the Fast Track was really, I was having these conversations with students. I was honestly showing them the Burning Glass report and showing them the Creators Field Guide, and having conversation about all of the companies that use Unreal and all of the ways that they can get a job. They do there's a survey that's done every year called the Freshman Survey, where they look at they interview undergraduate freshmen, and they ask them the same questions year over year. And over the past few decades, we've seen the answer for what is a very important reason for going to college, just to get a job, has skyrocketed to the top. Students go to college these days to get a job. And so that's what they're so focused on. So that conversation happens a lot. And I explain, all these companies, here's the whole list of companies that are using Unreal. And then the students go, all right, great, where do I get started? And Unreal is a huge tool, and there is so much learning content out there, like just so much. And we have our own Unreal Online Learning, which is some really, really high quality stuff that initially started with professionals wanting us to make learning content for them at the companies they work at. So the goal was to set up workshops that were a pathway. So that when a student said, I want to learn Unreal, I say, boom, go use the Fast Track. Use the Fast Track. It sets you down the path. You're using learning content that was made for professionals, and you're getting that same content, and it's bringing you along where you're not only doing the Unreal Online courses, but you have an overarching project throughout where you take what you learn in each course and you add it to a third-person platformer. So for the first one, you set up a level and you add death and respawning, and then after you do the blueprints course, you add power-ups into your game, and then you do your first hour with UMG, learning how to make a UI, user interface, and then you add health and score into your game. Just over time, you're adding more and more, and it's introducing you to more concepts with Unreal Engine, so that by the end of the 5 workshops, as I said, the goal is when you're done to go, okay, I feel comfortable clicking new, create project, and starting from there. Yeah, so that's where the idea from the fast track came from, and then we went virtual. It was initially going to be with a few pilot groups, and we already we decided to bring it virtual because of current events. And with that, we launched a
How
Discord server.
opportune.
Yes, yeah, really, the learning content worked out really well. So we launched a Discord server alongside it, so that when we started bringing out the workshops, students could interact with each other, and they could get help from one another, and they could work together in teams, with the idea being there's no actual teacher. But if 4 students are doing the same tutorial, separately, and one of them can't figure something out, the other 3 can help that person. And so there's power in students working together, and there's also that accountability. The other thing that I've found is that students, they have the knowledge is out there, right? There is so much knowledge on the internet, you can learn anything. But what really helps students is this guide, like this pathway, so that they can know where they need to go and to keep them down that pathway. Because there's motivation and then there's discipline. And so having these kind of workshop by workshop and giving them a schedule for it really helps them hone their discipline. Yeah, so that's a fast track. In short, we've it's been an amazing success. We are at 4,600, over 4,600 students.
Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing. And so they actually they go to the blog site, which anyone can go to, right? It was posted on the chat here. So, and then you can actually download directly from the blog site the actual workshops themselves. And so even if you're not participating, people can go and access this content and work through it. So you don't specifically have to be participating in the fast track to go and get the learning, because at Epic, we believe that everyone gets access to all of our learning content. And so, but they're actually going to the blog site and they're actually getting the fast track courses and material, and then they're going to online learning, and then they're getting the additional learning they get from there, and then they're using Discourse as Discord as a place to actually communicate with each other as they're sharing the learning, right? Is it pretty much?
Yeah, it's been amazing. We've seen so many different countries represented in the server, and they're helping one another and finding teams to work on projects. And there's been a whole wide range of skills that many of the students have, ranging from students that come in that have never touched Unreal before, to students that are actually in 10 days starting an internship at Epic.
Wow.
And and they're able to talk with each other and get excited about Unreal Engine 5. That was a big deal yesterday.
I'm sure.
And get help. They're posting their screenshots saying, "Why doesn't this work? Does anyone have resources for this?"
So it's a huge community, right? Like it's a community of learners in essence.
Yeah. It's very new, about a month at this point, but it's been amazing seeing this community form and seeing students take it upon themselves to help each other, and the way that when they help each other, they help themselves learn.
And you've got guest lectures that come in and talk about all kinds of things.
Yeah. So I've been doing initially it was weekly, and then I got ahead of myself and started getting more. So we've had more than weekly, but set up to be weekly. Guest speakers to come in and do Q&As. I've been calling it. It's really much more like I'd say a private podcast, where I talk with and interview the person, and then the people that are there are able to listen in and ask questions. And it's been the goal was to have a real range for people that students might not normally be able to interact with on a day-to-day basis. So as I said, we've had people that run game publishers come in. We have had indie developers. We had a developer, Gwen Frey, who initially worked on the BioShock series and then went and started an indie studio called the Molasses Flood. And then went and started another indie studio called Chump Squad, which just made Kine, and that was an Epic Game Store exclusive, and she was a dev grant recipient, so it was a great conversation around her experience. And as I mentioned, we just had a couple of Psionics devs come on and talk about their experiences. One of them had been at Psionics for 9 years, apparently, and so he was able to talk about the whole experience that he's witnessed from their infancy to now. So as someone said in the chat, the fast track is a real great way for students and people, right? Because any lifetime learners can do it, to start learning Unreal and start to build a portfolio, which goes into my next area of really helping create a pathway for building portfolio pieces. Because it's hard to understand. If you ask like what should a portfolio piece look like, what steps should I take when thinking about it, there's a process, and we can innately understand it, but writing it down so students know the step by step. And so that's where I'm hoping to bring in next, because we're the fast track Discord, it's become too successful for me to allow it to just be a one-time thing. I'm gonna keep it alive, and any students that want to come on and want help learning the engine, want help growing their skills, creating portfolio pieces, making projects, the goal is to help them and guide them as it grows and grows.
I know that you did this for students, but I think you've had interest from non-students as well. Like, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And could this be used by educators, is my other question for you.
Yeah, so we actually had, as a very, very tiny pilot, we had an educator from my alma mater use it as a way, because it really created a flipped classroom environment where students would on their own do the online learning courses, go through the workshop content, and then arrive in the classroom, and they'd be able to talk about what they did, be able to talk about best practices and where they can grow and what they can take from it. And the conversation, because it's really teaching the engine, but you're also creating a project, you're able to kind of build your curriculum based on whatever you need it to be. So for instance, it could be a design professor teaching game design, and the homework is really learning the tool, but then they come in and they can hone the project that they're working on through the design principles of working with the professor. Or it can just be purely learning the engine and growing there. So it's worked great for educators. And yeah, you can enroll, join the Discord, or as Lewis mentioned, on the fast track page, if you just scroll down, you just got to scroll down a little bit, and all of the workshops are available for you to download.
That's awesome. Yeah. So do you want to share anything? You want to share your screen and share any work or anything like that? Or
well, you have the I can show it on my screen, or you can show it on I think you have it popped up as well, right?
The blog? Yeah.
Yeah, we can we can show the
Sure, let me pop it up here.
Yeah, just
let me see. So I've got here the fast track. And this is the blog. So if you go to unrealengine.com /fast track, you will get join the Discord access here. But then you also get access to the guides themselves.
Yep. Right there, all you got to do is scroll down. And Guide 5 is coming out momentarily in a very exciting fashion. The final is being sent from the graphic designer in mere moments, is my understanding, which is awesome. And so then the whole thing will be ready for anyone to go through in its entirety.
So I've got right now the example of workshop number 2 up, Seven, so that you can talk a little bit about what this is.
Absolutely. So as you can see, all of the we can stick on the first page for a sec.
Sure.
Or I guess the second page after the title.
Okay.
You can see it's split into 3 different sections for each workshop. The first one being it's called the test drive, which is where the students do an Unreal Online Learning course. And then the next one being called the Grand Prix, which is when it's kind of extra learning, taking what they've learned and growing step by step. So as seen here in workshop 2, they work on making power-ups in their game, and they touch on timelines just a little bit, and other kind of aspects within the character movement component, so they can just understand slowly how the engine works. And then we have an off-roading and discussion section, which is built for that's the time when you can really feel okay failing, feel okay breaking things, try, explore, take what you've learned and start really moving with it and see what you can do or can't do, or just mess around. Because there is a real fun enjoyment with messing around with Unreal. When you do these courses, they get ideas. When you're watching something and you see, okay, they added this component, that's neat. You can step towards this light and the light will start following you. And suddenly students get ideas and they want to try things and make things. And so that section is really for breaking things and discussing it with other students that are working, whether it's a small group of them doing it together or others in the Discord or a classroom environment. The discussion where they can talk about I call it the 3Ds, difficulty. So what were the hardest parts for each person? The discoveries, what were some cool things that you didn't know about that you kind of came across when you were exploring? And then dreams, what ideas do you have? What do you want to make? What would it take to make that? And as you can see, as Lewis is scrolling through, these are the step-by-step instructions. So you've got video content and text content to help, the video content being the Unreal Online Learning courses, and the text-based content being the kind of step-by-step instructions building specific things. Yeah, it's been awesome, honestly. The fast track, the experience for the students and for myself has been a really great time this past month.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So what's the plan? What happens next?
Right. And that got asked in chat as well. It's looking at right now. So looking at the fast track, looking at how it went. Good old postmortems, always helpful. And then it's taking the So we definitely want to build more. I want to. So I'll push for it. I want to build more fast tracks. I'd love to expand it to architecture. I'd love to expand it to film. I'd love to expand it to automotive and intermediate game development. Really help students have this whole curriculum, whether they're in school, not in school, in school for something completely different, and just want to learn this. Like, just have this content available.
Should instructors just tell their students to keep an eye out for it, or go to unrealengine.com, or how do people sort of help other people become aware of it? Just go to. Is there a way to find it on Discord? Is there a way to find it on just go to unrealengine.com, or is publicized on social? Or
yeah, so we'll have the fast track page up. That's staying up. You can send that all around, and that'll be soon linked on the student Unreal Engine. We have if you go to Unreal Engine in the education section, there's a page for students that will shortly have the fast track page there. And we have the, if you're on the Discord, you can just take the invite link It's just discord.gg/Unreal Fast Track. Discord's working really, they're working closely with us. They like what we're doing and the educational content. And so we're continuing to walk through it. Yeah, the content is, I know some people are talking about this kind of, it's books, like these are workshop PDFs, which are great. Like I find it complements the video lectures really well. And yeah, so we're just gonna continue to make more fast tracks and keep the server going, to help students, because I've recognized, and this is, alongside the um, tool learning, right? Help them understand how they can achieve their own discipline, and help them get past the initial blast of motivation to sticking to something and seeing something through. And so that's what I'm kind of next steps for the server itself.
Awesome. So there were a couple questions that popped through. One was, is it available internationally or just locally? And it is available everywhere. That's correct.
Everywhere.
Yes?
We've had so many languages, so many different languages appear on the Discord. So you can download it. The workshop guide is currently available in English. So we're looking at localization, and that's, cross my fingers that we can do that. But the learning content completely free, workshop guides completely free. All you have to do is go on there, download it. Learning should be available to everybody, right?
Right. And so you sort of already addressed, what's next, whether there'll be a fast track 2. And so you talked about that a little bit. One question was kind of interesting. Are you finding that there are groups of students from different academic institutions that sort of join in as pairs or in groups? Or, are you finding different smatterings? Do you have any information about that? Is it encouraged? Would you say that, an institution should encourage a group of, a dozen students to join, or are they just kind of coming from everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, they're coming from everywhere. Some have been pushed by their instructors that they've seen it, and they've wanted to kind of spread it further. The instructors really like it too. I just talked to a high school teacher earlier this week who started using it for her grade 10, for her 10th graders, and they've dove in. So it's not too challenging for high schoolers either to jump in, which has been great. Yeah, it's ranged from students finding it on their own to professors telling them, to other students sharing it locally with their school. It's really ranged, and that's been great. And they've kind of, they've all joined together, and I've been really amazed at the students that have stepped up, and instead of saying like, "Oh, I know way more than this," like I mentioned, this student who's interning at Epic, I didn't know he was interning at Epic until weeks into the fast track. And so he was just helping other students. And then I talked to him, and I was like, wow, you know your stuff really well. And he said, yeah, well, I'm going to be working with, the optimization team this summer. And I was like, oh, what? So that's been incredible, seeing students that want to just help others.
Yeah. And, there's another question that's kind of interesting. I think we should address it, which is, what is the skill level? So I think that, it seems to be pretty large range of skill level. The first one starts quite, fundamental. Can you address the skill level for the fast track?
Yeah. If you have never touched Unreal Engine before, go for it. That is like, you don't need any experience. It starts you off right then and there with, I have not touched Unreal Engine. It's helpful if you've touched a computer before, but it's really, the current fast track guide is really for it's at the beginner level right now. And I've had a number of students actually say to me, who are experienced in Unreal, say, this is really helpful because the way I learned was a smattering, was random and hodgepodge, and just kind of diving in on my own, watching random YouTube tutorials. But Epic, we make good content because we know how to make good learning content. And so we know what goes into teaching, and thus we base our content based off of really learning this difficult tool. I wouldn't say difficult, but at least in the beginning, definitely high barrier to entry. At least it feels that way. That there's just this difficulty of starting that a lot of people have, and so the way they learn is very hodgepodge, and so these students will they've said, like, thank you, it's really good for giving me a firm understanding of actually all of the underlying concepts that I haven't understood before. I've just been coding and going, and when I hit a wall, I figure out exactly what's going on there, but now I understand these tool as a whole on a better level. So that's been great. Someone mentioned group size. I do want to touch on that. 3 to 4 is what I've been saying. Maybe you can go up to 6, but as I'm sure all the educators here know, the larger the classroom, the less learning that's able to get done. So I suggest small groups of I've been saying 3 to 5, and I'll say maybe 6, but at that point consider breaking into 2 groups of 3. But more than that, and I think you don't have the best student-to-student interaction. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, this has been a really great stream, I think, and hopefully you all who are joining us for the stream have gained some value from it. But, as we open it up for questions, and if you guys have been holding some questions, please start bringing them into the chat. But is there anything else that you'd like to add, Lisa, Linda, or Seven, about things that we've been sharing? And it doesn't even have to be about, what you shared with us specifically.
I want to say that all of this stuff really ties together well, and that we've got so much stuff out there that when you're doing the fast track, check the skills, and look at the other learning content. I know it's built in, but there's a really nice ecosystem of content out there that supports everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just say, please use our resources, please. Right. Fast Track's open to everybody. The Burning Glass report, the skills taxonomy, everything is just completely available to everybody. And we are at a time when teaching, we need to, obviously the education team at Epic, and I'm sure many teachers everywhere are trying new things and failing fast. That's a great way to think about it, of just learning, how do we teach in this time? And so please use the resources.
Absolutely.
And give us feedback. We're also figuring out what works and trying some things, and would love to hear your feedback as we iterate on some of these things. So reach out. I think you're sharing the Teams alias if people have questions or feedback or want to share. What do you want to see? How can we make these resources more relevant for you?
Yeah, we're scrolling that across the bottom here, so you can reach out to us at ueacademia@epicgames.com. So please feel free to send us a note even after the stream has ended. We'll all receive this and send us anything about, even after you've gone through some of this or downloaded some of this material, you want to hear, read more of it, or if you've got some, it doesn't even have to be good feedback, or nice feedback, I should say. If you're like, we needed more of this, or it could use more of that, I think that is really helpful to us. And I think one of the notes that came in through the chat was, this is valuable because someone hears in the period in their life where they're redirecting their career. And I think that there's a lot of people right now with, the current situation where there's so many people that are having to, or have the opportunity to think about what their future means. An interesting thing happened to me. I ruptured my Achilles tendon, and I had, this happened in a time where when that happened, you sat for 9 months and did very little because you wore a very big cast for a very long time. And it was during that period of time that I learned 3D because I couldn't stand up and do anything. So I sat in front of a computer and I taught myself back then 3D Studio DOS. That's how old I am. And so, that's not unlike what we're going through here in many ways, is where you have this very unique period of time. And so back then it was really hard to get a hold. There was no YouTube, there was no Google, there was nothing. But here alone, if you go to unrealengine.com, you've got 60, 70 free courses. You've got the fast track program, you've got skills taxonomy. I mean, the creator's field guide, you've got the burning glass report, all this data that can really help to shape, the things you learn. If you're an educator and you've got the summer coming up and you're like, well, what am I going to do with my course? What am I going to do? If you're a chair, department administrator, and you're like, how do I make my curriculum more distinctive? How do I change and evolve my program? What's the data that's helping me to understand what we should do? What does industry want? We're working to help provide that. And what I think is super special about Tim Sweeney and the people at Epic is that we don't put this stuff together and say, you have to become the special person at Epic that, gives us, all this money in order to gain access to this. We build this material and we make it available because, we believe that it's by opening up our garden that it really blossoms and grows. And so I think it's a real privilege for us to come on a stream like this and be able to talk. I know that we have some streams where we get in the engine and do some really cool stuff in there and inspire everyone, but I think these are just as inspiring because we don't often get a chance to talk about this stuff that is really valuable to a huge community of people that sometimes can wander the internet aimlessly going, where exactly is this stuff? So, hopefully this is really valuable. I know that Tom and Mark have been in there answering a lot of questions as well. I know that you guys are looking at some questions. Were there any questions that you saw pop through that you wanted to address?
I'd like to, I did notice some questions about funding and stuff and
please.
Equipment. This is primarily aimed at secondary educators, but we do have a contest for lesson plans. And our lesson plans, there's a template and everything to submit. And it's a $25,000 prize with some second prizes and honorable mentions. And
you can buy a lot of equipment.
You can buy a lot of equipment with that. And we would love to see what you do with our tools. The contest is for Fortnite Creative, Twinmotion, and Unreal. And sometimes the best way to be able to teach is just to take a stab and learn it yourself and write a great lesson plan you can use. Because we know fall is going to be challenging for a lot of schools. There's probably not going to be a lot of on ground. So get creative, win some money.
And I also want to share that this next Friday stream is going to be another great learning stream. We have some special guests coming in. Shor DeYoung, who many of you may know as Herensis. He's been using Unreal Engine for probably 20 years. I know that when I had a game studio back in the mid 2000s and made some of the first games I made, I used to go to his website and learn Unreal Engine 3. He's going to be on the stream with Mario to talk about the Kickstart program, which is an amazing set of 7-8 hours of learning that they did across the breadth of the engine, where he and the team of evangelists, primarily in EMEA, got together and they sat down and mapped out a lot of the key systems of the engine, the animation, the effects system, the lighting, the materials, AI. And they wanted to really sort of map out how they all work and how they relate to each other. And then they recorded all of that content and put it up on our online learning platform. So we're going to spend the stream with Shord and Mario really going over the Kickstart program and the series of videos, and then they're going to jump into some of the projects and some of the schematics that they built, talking about how the relationship of the engine works as a whole. So I think it really relates a lot to the creator's field guide in a much more visual, maybe tactical way. So you can sort of look at well, how does animation work, and an animation blueprint works with the actual blueprint that you put in to the level, and understanding how that may work with AI, and so it's going to be an amazing thing. Not to mention the fact that just Short is very inspiring, and I think it'll be a great stream. That's May 22nd, and May 29th, Matt Workman, who hopefully you all have gone to at least the virtual production field, the virtual production Facebook group. He's very active on that, and he's also been on some of our other streams. On Thursday will be joining us for our Friday stream, because we get a lot of requests from educators who are interested in building curriculums for virtual production. Virtual production is a kind of a complicated topic, right? Because there's so many aspects of it. But Matt has been doing a lot of work in virtual production, and one of the great things I think that he does on his YouTube channel and on Facebook is that he sort of has approached it from the bottom up. How you can not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, how you can sort of work at it from the engine, and then start, maybe accessing it through what's the right camera, and then, maybe start adding some green screen, and then how do you light a green screen, and then how do you connect 5 controllers to it. And so over the course of the last 3 months, Matt has probably become one of the authorities of indie virtual production. And I think that if you're an educator and you maybe don't have $500,000 to spend on virtual production, this would be a great stream, because we're going to walk through some indie virtual production material, which I think will be really, really helpful for those of you who are looking to understand what it means and how you might even be able to approach it and think about it from a curriculum perspective. Did you guys see any questions pop through that we wanted to address as we start to wrap up today's stream?
I saw one question on, are we at the saturation point for the demand for these skills? Like, where are we at with that? And I think someone already answered and shared the Burning Glass, but I would just say, based on the data that we've seen in Burning Glass, we're nowhere near close. 600% job growth in the demand for real-time skills, and that's projected to continue for the next, several years. So yeah, I think we're only at the beginning of where this is going to go.
Absolutely. I also wanted to mention, I forgot for a second, that we've also invited Linda to come back. She, as I mentioned, has been really focused on the secondary education space. And so we're working on a stream that will focus really on secondary education. And we've been building more and more material for the secondary education space, market, whatever, we want to really make sure that those of you who are teaching in secondary have resources. Unreal Engine is just as available to you as it is to anyone else. All of our learning resources are available to you as well. What Linda's really focusing on is working with secondary educators and accessing more curriculum that maybe has already been assembled, and helping to collect it and make it available in other ways. So I think that we're going to look for a period here in the coming weeks to really have a secondary education focus for one of our streams. So we'll be sure to advertise it and let you all know. So those of you in the secondary education space can join us for that, and we'll be excited about that as well. There's one last question that we'll address, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Very little information about mobile development. Android. Well, I think that's a good question. Probably better for a Thursday stream or something like that. These Friday streams are really focused on the educator space. We do have some good documentation for the mobile platforms, and none of us really are experts in the mobile space here. But hopefully you enjoyed today's stream, and you will join us next Friday for the Kickstart with Short and Mario, and the Friday after with Matt Workman. Is there anything else that you'd all like to add as we're wrapping up today?
Thanks for having us.
It's been
Yeah,
a pleasure.
thank you, Louis.
Thank you
Great
so
job.
very
Fun.
much.
This was a great time.
Yeah. And so
Have us back.
absolutely, we'll have you back. Typically, these get turned into a YouTube archive here in a couple days. So if you missed any of this, please be sure and check us out in a couple days on YouTube. And thank you very much for joining us today. And please come back next Friday. Thank you again, Lisa, Linda, and Seven. Hope you guys have a great weekend.
Pleasure.
Enjoy your quarantine.
Thank you.
See
Thanks,
ya.
everyone.
Bye, guys.
See you later. Bye.